In archaeology, an artifact is considered to be diagnostic if it refers only to one specific defined context of a geographic region and time period. This kind of artifact shows a set of observable traits that can diagnose the archaeological context. The procedure follows similar principles of observing a set of health symptoms that can diagnose an illness, or a set of anatomical features that can diagnose a biological species. Knowing about a diagnostic artifact in advance can be instrumental in clarifying its original context. For instance, a direct contextual association is either missing or else incredibly vague when artifacts are found on the present-day ground surface or in a disturbed setting. Similar problems can happen with museum collections that have been removed from their original contexts. In these cases, a distinctive or diagnostic artifact can indicate the original geographic area and time period. As one example, Samian ware was a distinctive category of Roman pottery made from the 1st century BC through the 3rd century AD, initially produced in northern Italy and then eventually produced in other areas of the Roman Empire. Samian ware can be diagnosed by its particular red color, a glossy appearance, the addition of decorations in relief, and the depictions of scenes from mythology. Sometimes potters even signed their names onto the vessels. The products were distributed and traded throughout the Roman Empire. Wherever these artifacts happen to be found today, the original context can be ascertained confidently. Samian ware was not the only Roman pottery of its time period. Samian ware tended to be associated with practical and domestic contexts, and sometimes it was described as tableware. Different pottery of the same time period may have been used for other purposes. In this way, Samian ware may be considered as diagnostic not only of a geographic region and time period, but also of an activity context. In some cases, a whole series of artifacts can diagnose each separate time period in a complete chronological sequence. A fundamental aspect of archaeology involves the ability to separate and distinguish the individual time periods of the past, instead of presenting the past as if it were a singular monothetic entity. Toward this goal, diagnostic artifacts have been essential. Otherwise, all of the artifacts from the past would be lumped together, thus creating illogical anachronisms of combining Roman pottery with medieval pottery, with pre-Roman pottery, or with all pottery from a pre-industrial period. These monothetic views of the past tend to be based on thinking about the past from the present, usually identifying a point in time within a bias of present-day awareness, such as the beginning of the global industrial period, the beginning of the Roman Empire, or the beginning of a farming economy. In this view, everything prior to the reference point is lumped together in a generic category such as pre-industrial, pre-Roman, or pre-farming. These categories technically are correct, but they ignore all of the information from archaeology about defining separate time periods. By knowing about the full inventory of diagnostic artifacts, archaeologists can illustrate what changed through time in a region and thereby avoid the problems of anachronisms. In my work in the Mariana Islands of Pacific Oceania, I demonstrated the diagnostic pottery and other artifacts in a complete sequence of time periods, from the time of first inhabitation, at least as early as 1500 BC, all the way through the end of the traditional indigenous Latte period, around AD 1700. The sequence in the Mariana Islands revealed a much more refined chronology than previously had been understood in a modern-day viewpoint as only a two-part chronology of the traditional indigenous Latte period versus everything else that predated the Latte period. This outcome was possible by identifying the diagnostic artifacts in each one of these separate archaeological layers and directly dated contexts. A diagnostic artifact can be identified through three steps of, first, finding an object within a defined context, second, documenting the sets of traits or features that characterize the object, and third, demonstrating that the same sets of traits or features are repeated in other objects that are found within the same scope of context. The first step involves the basic field research of finding an object within a specific place and within a measured time interval. Ideally, the artifact is found within a discrete and preserved sedimentary layer that can be dated confidently within brackets of when it started and when it ended. After establishing the measured place and time period of a group of artifacts, the second step involves examining those artifacts in terms of identifying the characteristics that could be diagnostic. Many artifacts are generic and non-diagnostic, such as the basic stone flaking debris that people have created all around the world and throughout multiple time periods. Other artifacts are distinctive due to the combinations of technical and artistic attributes that could be unique and therefore potentially diagnostic. The third step involves finding the potentially diagnostic artifacts repeatedly at different site locations, and then demonstrating how each discovery fits within a measurable geographic region and a measurable time period. These three steps enabled the definition of Samian ware as diagnostic of tableware of the Roman Empire during the 1st century BC through the 3rd century AD. These same procedures enabled the definition of the complete chronological sequence of artifacts in the Mariana Islands from approximately 1500 BC through AD 1700. Whenever I see artifacts in a timeline, in a museum exhibit, or in another representation of the past, then I look for how the artifacts may or may not be diagnostic of the relevant time periods. Unfortunately, professional scholars and museum curators often have shown incorrect or incomplete information about the chronological sequences of diagnostic artifacts. These problems can be overcome quite easily just by gaining familiarity with the basic work of archaeology. As always, thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video.